Hi everyone. In this short video, what I want to talk about what are some of the current issues for participation and pedagogy in teaching senior maths. Now there's lots of things we could talk about here, but here's the ones I'm going to focus on. The first one is declining participation, and then I'll look at gender, Indigenous learning in maths, differentiation, guided versus direct versus explicit instruction, integrating mathematical processes while developing the content. These are sort of some of the things. I could have done lots of other things, but these are the ones that seem to be relevant at the moment. So let's go through them in turn. Now, what we know is across Queensland there are fewer students taking advanced mathematics courses. And we also know that many students take a course lower than what they could or should be doing. And there's a range of reasons for doing that. These include things like they don't think they need it for later study, they think they can get a better OP or ATAR score by choosing an easier one, but probably more often than not they think the other options are more attractive. So in general, we have a lot of kids who don't do Maths C in Queensland, and we have lots of kids doing just Maths B who could do Maths C, and we have a lot of students who do Maths A who should be doing Maths B. And certainly we have lots of students who don't do any maths apart from what's the basic requirements for their certificate, but and this has consequences. So some of these consequences for the student themselves in terms of their options at university are quite limited. So even nowadays, if someone wants to become a primary school teacher, they have to have some maths in their year 11 and 12. And there's very few courses at university if they haven't got any maths. Similarly, if they want to go on and do some of the trades like electricity and things like that, electricians, sorry, if they haven't got any maths, they'll struggle with some of the basic coursework involved. So taking senior maths is important, and encouraging kids to take higher and deeper levels of mathematics is also important, not just for the students themselves, but for the country. Now, a report came out a few years ago, it was sponsored by BHP, and they estimated that Australia is 25,000 maths graduates short every year. That's not including engineers and things like that, but students who actually study mathematics who then can go on and do jobs in various sectors like banking, finance, engineering, other sorts of fields which require mathematicians, and particularly statistics as well. So these consequences are important for the student, but also for the country. And it's something we're trying to do something about. If any of you get a chance, if you have a look at the AMSI website, they've got a program called Choose Maths, which is particularly about trying to encourage girls to participate in maths, but also increasing participation more generally. Now certainly we have, this problem is exacerbated when it comes to girls. We know that the results for girls in mathematics at senior levels are generally close enough to equivalent of those of the boys. It used to be that the boys did a lot better, but in recent years it's certainly the case that the girls do as well. And yet when they finish year 12, very few go on to study mathematics or physics or engineering. So at year 11 and 12 level, the participation rates in senior maths are close enough to even. Not quite, but close enough. And yet in these other courses, post-secondary school, we know that in mathematics courses, for example, we have no more than 15% of girls. In engineering, I think it's up to about 25%. And in physics, it can be as low as 5%. So one of the things we need to do while we're teaching students in their mathematics, senior maths courses at school in year 11 and 12 is of course to get them to learn the content and to equip them to be able to do the things, but also to see themselves as pursuing mathematics as a career in their jobs and at university. And this is more so the case with girls because simply so few of them take it up. There's no cognitive reason why they shouldn't do it. It's just somehow that through their schooling mostly and through other images and understandings through society, girls get the idea that maths isn't for them. And this is the problem because we're not only short of maths teachers, we lack we're short of mathematicians or people with mathematical level expertise at a higher level, but we don't get a diversity of people studying it, and so therefore we get quite a narrow understanding sometimes of these fields. Similarly, there is very, very few Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who do well in senior maths. Now, there's no cognitive reason for this at all. It's something about the perceptions of it, which, again, they've most likely learned through school, but also other factors that inhibit them from taking part in advanced mathematics. Around Australia, we have very few Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who have mathematics degrees and certainly PhDs and higher degrees. One is Chris Matthews here at Griffith University, and he's certainly a very highly regarded mathematician, and he happens to be also an Aboriginal man. Compounding factors for these often is the remoteness, so for Aboriginal kids living out in the bush, often they don't get the variety of choices at school, nor do they have the range of teachers where we get a bigger turnover, and sometimes these kids really miss out. So we really need to find different ways for these learners to access mathematics. And if you're in your school, when you start teaching, if you've got some Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island kids in the junior levels, try and find ways to connect with them, try and find ways to connect them to mathematics and ways that they might want to think about taking senior mathematics as they go along. Another problem we have is I'll call differentiation, and I don't mean the calculus type here, but within our maths class we'll always have a range of kids, a range of personalities, a range of abilities, a range of backgrounds. And when we come into senior maths, because there's a pressure around the content we have to cover and the timelines we have to deal with things, we tend to narrow things down quite quickly. And therefore we lose a lot of students along the way, not just in terms of cognitive, but they lose interest because it doesn't seem to interest them anymore. We aim sort of right down the middle and make sure the higher end kids are covered, but there's a real need for differentiation and thinking to try and find ways that we have activities where all kids can get access at the start. There's a variety of contexts and activities that they can engage in, and if they don't like one of them or they don't connect with one of them, then maybe they'll have another one, but try not to have them all looking the same. And when we get problems, often there's more than one solution pathway. But in our teaching, we often only offer one solution pathway. So we need to think about differentiation. We often think about this in the junior school, and then when we get to senior school, we don't worry about it anymore. We think they're quite homogeneous, where in fact, the students in our senior classes, it can be quite diverse, and we need to cater for that diversity. Also, with the pressure of time, often what we have trouble with is giving them more chance to explore the mathematical ideas. Again, time's always an issue. There's never going to be enough time, but also the history of tradition, and we have these textbooks which lay everything out for us, and also assessment, that we just end up with very direct instruction all the time. Now, there's nothing wrong with direct instruction. Sometimes we need to teach kids things, show them how to do it straight away. Show them on the board, give them some worked examples, and then get them to do some exercises. There's nothing wrong with that, unless that's all they ever do. And if you think about the maths curriculum, it doesn't just talk about being able to do mathematical procedures. It also talks about applications, modelling, problem solving, and those sorts of things. And you really can't teach them effectively through direct, explicit instruction. So we need to have a variety of forms of pedagogy in our class, and try and avoid the default position of just to tell them some notes on the board, some worked examples, and then exercises from the textbook. And this relates to this, trying to make sure we keep integrating the mathematical processes and developing the mathematical content at the same time. So when we talk about problem solving, it's not just problem solving on its own, it's problem solving with mathematical content. You have to have mathematical content to do the problem solving. But if you only have mathematical content, you've got the knowledge, but you're not doing anything with it. And so then a perception becomes that this is useless. So developing all these things together in a careful, meaningful, integrated way is important. And you would have seen that from some of the other videos and some that Phil has done as well. So take care to use appropriate pedagogies, but also develop all the dimensions of the mathematics that they need to do. Not just stuff in their head, but being able to do things and developing attitudes and values about the usefulness of mathematics at the same time. So here's some activities. As you learn about teaching senior mathematics, it's important to focus on the mathematical content. No one's saying content's not important, but also you need to focus on the learners. You're not just being a mathematician, you are a teacher. Your job is to try and do everything to get the learners engaged in the material, cognitively, in their skills, but also in their emotions. So think about some time when you had differentiating. What could you do? Is there some kids you're teaching on prac or something like that? How could have you differentiated it to make it more accessible to all the kids? How can you keep focusing on all your learners, because your job only exists because there's learners, with all the pressures of time and tradition and assessment? Because sometimes we can get so caught up with the problems of time, tradition and assessment that we forget that the kids are actually the purpose that we're there in the first place. So you can respond to these on the discussion board. There'll be a place for you to do that. And we will look forward to reading them. So thanks for watching, and I hope you're enjoying the course. I hope you're developing your ideas about teaching mathematics more broadly than just knowing the content. Knowing the content's really important, but your job is to try and help the kids know the content and to be able to use it in meaningful ways. All the best.